Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience and waiting while we get started. I'm just going to start by reading a statement. Normally at this time, we would read a land acknowledgement, which has become a way for non-Indigenous people to recognize the land we're on, in this case, the land we call Canada, which is the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. And it's the practice to honor the Indigenous peoples who've lived, worked on, and cared for this land and continue to do so. It's certainly been important to do this and to acknowledge that this land was stolen through colonialism, a violent and systemic process designed to erase Indigenous peoples, their language, culture, and history, and a process which continues today in so many ways. But like many others, I struggle with reading land acknowledgement if there isn't any action attached to it. This practice has become commonplace over the last few years, but at this point, it feels like acknowledgement isn't enough. We need to intentionally focus on the action we're taking and still need to take if reconciliation is to be possible. At Niche, we're committed to continuous learning about Indigenous culture, history, past and current challenges, and building relationships with our Indigenous partners and creating connections between Indigenous and newcomer communities. Our Truth and Reconciliation Committee has continued to drive learning and change at Niche since 2017. And our Reconciliation Program Coordinator, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, has done so much work with our other colleagues across Niche to make this learning meaningful and interactive in our programs for newcomer children, adults, and youth. And for those of you who are here, you can see the results of the Dreamcatcher project hanging in our space. And for those of you online, I encourage you to come and visit us and check it out and learn more about the program. This work has also included contributing to the City of Toronto's Indigenous Newcomers Guide and working with our Indigenous partners to create opportunities for newcomer and Indigenous groups to share their journeys and stories with each other. Of the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, we focus specifically on number 93, which calls for the revision of the newcomer information kit and citizenship test to reflect a more inclusive history of Indigenous peoples, including information about the treaties and history of residential schools. This has been a guiding principle as we've embedded more information and learning into our newcomer, citizenship test preparation, and civic engagement programs. We have a long way to go and we don't always get it right, but this work and how we approach it is evolving. I continue my own lifelong learning along with my colleagues and our community members to hold myself and to be held accountable to do better and to be mindful and intentional in our actions whose impact will be felt for generations to come. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our Truth and Reconciliation Coordinator, Joan Frank.
Hi there. Thank you everybody for coming and people online. And I have got to tell you, it is such an honor to have Nigaan Sinclair with us in person. Yay! Today. Yeah. This is going to kick off an actual total of 10 learning opportunities that we're going to be having over the next 10 months. And we'd like as many people as possible to be able to join in here. So we decided to try open and wide open. So newcomers, students, youth, everybody. What can I tell you about Nigaan? Well, I'm going to actually read his bio because everybody knows I'm famous for these 55-page long PowerPoints, and then I go up off script. Nigaan is Anishinaabe and an assistant professor at University of Manitoba. Century.
See, that would be a bit of a dated one then. Here, try this one.
So the bio is not okay.
I pulled it up.
Oh, thank you. That's
it. Assistant would be 2 jobs ago. So.
And a professor at the University of Manitoba, where he holds the Faculty of Arts Professorship in Indigenous Knowledge and Aesthetics in the Department of Indigenous Studies. Nigaan is also an award-winning writer, editor, and activist who was recently named to the Power List by Maclean's magazine as one of the most influential individuals in Canada. In 2018, he won Canadian Columnist of the Year at the National Newspaper Awards for his bi-weekly columns in the Winnipeg Free Press and is a featured member of the Friday Power Panel on CBC's Power of Politics. A former secondary school teacher, he won the 2019 Peace Educator of the Year from the Peace and Justice Studies Association based at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Absent from this is his involvement with Isle no More and the compilation books followed. And the fact that he is an inspiration to absolutely every Indigenous person here, like that we know on Turtle Island here. It's just such an honor to have you here, and it's probably really delightful for them to not have to listen to my voice. So I'm just going to, after a while, I just want to hear some reading. I'm so thrilled, and welcome.
Great. So miigwech for that. I'm sorry to throw the bio at you there. I just thought there's a lot of bios online, and so we'll read an updated one. So it's nice to be here. So bonjour and Nigaan It's nice to be here. It's nice to think of my daughter on a day like this because I don't know if you heard what I just mentioned. When I came in, I was listening to the installation of the new, very first in Canadian history, First Nations premier of a province. And so we've had First Nations premiers of territories. We've had Métis premiers of provinces, but we've never had a First Nations premier. And my daughter worked very hard during this election for the NDP. So it's a very important day for her. I'm certainly not a member of the party. But for her, it's a very big day. It's a big moment in which young First Nations woman, where as a young First Nations female in this country, you're 50-50, 50% chance you're going to university, 50% chance you're going murdered or missing. And so the reality is that for a young First Nations woman, you are, seeing someone who is, attained the office of premier, I think is really important. But it's not just that. The cabinet today is the most diverse cabinet in history in Manitoba. There you have ministers who are trans, who are LGBTQ, who are Indigenous females, Métis and First Nations females. You have people who have abilities and I've been told to say disabled, but I'm not sure that's always the most inclusive term. And then, of course, you have people who are coming from all different walks of life, newcomers as well. And so this is a really beautiful and important day. My name is Nigaan Sinclair. I'm a professor at the University of Manitoba. I'm a columnist at Winnipeg Free Press, and I do a bunch of things in the community. So this is my final day of an 8-day tour. I'm home for a couple days, and then I do another 11-day tour of the United States. So it's nice to be able just to fit this in. I was supposed to do this from a hotel room, and now I'm doing it here. So Joan, I think, has been very persistent to bring me here, and big credit to Joan that Joan was able to bring me over here. And I think Joan said yesterday, why don't you just come in? And I said, okay, sure, I'm happy to do it. I'm on my way to film some stuff down at Queen's Park this afternoon. So as soon as I finish here, I got to run, but it's nice to be here. So this is my first of 10 sessions that I'll be offering to you in a kind of elongated discussion around Indigenous peoples, Indigenous cultures, communities. I'll talk a little bit about Indigenous rights, but I don't really want to bombard you with like the legalese and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But if you would like me to talk about that, I'm happy to do so. I do sessions on these big talks. I train judges on Indigenous law. And so I can do the high level conversations. I can also do the really granular stuff because I do work with poverty frontline activism. As you heard, I don't know more. I started my life as an activist. I'm certainly not a person organizing marches anymore, but I absolutely have that past in my experience. And I do work in poverty. So I've worked in the downtown core of Winnipeg for 35 years. So 30 years, not 35 years, 30 years, since I was 17. I'm 47 now. And so I've done a lot of work with frontline poverty. And you'll see some of that work coming forward when I do some PowerPoints on what's the work that we do with the Mama Bear Clan in downtown Winnipeg, literally saving people's lives in the encampments run by grandmothers. I certainly am just a gopher and all of that, but I've been doing that work for about 30 years. Anyways, so I want to talk a little bit about what your work is as newcomers, as Canadians, as people who are affiliated, allies with Indigenous peoples. I'm not sure how many Indigenous peoples there are on the call, other than maybe if, here in the building, but I'm going to talk a little bit about Anishinaabe. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the laws that you inherit when you come off the plane or come off the boat or you're born here. Every single person, I don't care if you're here for 10 minutes or if you're here for 3, 10, 15 generations, inherits what we call Niigaan or Shkonigan, which is the laws of this place, which predate Anishinaabe, even predate all Indigenous peoples. There is a set of laws that exist within this place that I'll talk a little bit about when I talk about the earth, which is the next session, I think, which I forgot what the order of everything is. But when I talk about the earth, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the earth today, because what I'm really talking about is the laws of life, or what in English we would say natural law, right? Because it is the law of this place to promote life. It's a job of the world, really, to promote life. If you were to say, what is it that brings Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, any of the beliefs of the world, what is it that brings people together? It is ultimately that there is a fundamental belief that life begats life, that everything has a purpose, there's a meaning in this, and most importantly is that everything leans towards sustainability and existence. Like, for example, like water doesn't destroy itself or else there would be no water, right? Birds don't kill themselves or else there'd be no birds. Air doesn't kill us or we wouldn't be here. So everything leans on the side of creating life, or life begats life. So Anishinaabe have been studying that for a very long period of time. And I'm going to revisit this when I talk about the earth talk. But you have to understand that basic principle that is fundamental law or natural law or Ishkonigan to this place, which is that for Indigenous peoples, life is what we strive for. We strive to promote and build life. Everything comes from that main teaching. And what that means is that everything that we do, all of our songs, all of our stories, everything we do with Canadians, with the earth, with the water, with the trees, everything is intended to follow that law. Or what I would say is work with the current. When you work with the current, you get very far. When you canoe, you get very, very far. If you go against the current, and that sometimes is necessary, sometimes you need to, at times, maybe conflict with someone, or sometimes life is necessary to offer sacrifice or commitment. I mean, why else would we hunt? But sometimes when we go against the current, we don't get as far, and we have to be extra careful. We have to be extra kind. We have to be extra sort of fervent in our commitment, because if not, you only have to realize that the world wants you to go with the current. The world wants you to promote life, to build life. So if you go against that, and I'm thinking really right now about our relatives in the Middle East, and I'm thinking about our relatives right now that are suffering from having their homes under duress. I'm thinking about our relatives who just can't seem to find a way to get along and to live together. I'm thinking about our relatives that are in the Middle East right now that are our children who are wondering where they will sleep tonight. And that's what I'm really thinking about. I'm thinking about a world that sort of constantly wants to go against the tide in some way. And that is where our biggest struggles have always resided as humanity, which is when we have rejected the very teachings of the earth itself. Now, you may have witnessed something that you saw this morning, which is you saw Joan offer me this little tobacco pouch right here, and you might have all witnessed it. I also brought another one that I received yesterday in Waterloo. And so, like I said, this is my 8th day of a series of talks. I started in Niagara. I went to Toronto, then I went to Durham, and then I just ended in Waterloo, and now I'm back here in Toronto. This is Toronto, right?
Yes.
Toronto, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't really know where, because Durham is like sort of Toronto, but not Toronto. It's like Whitby or something, right? Or Pickering or something. I don't know, it's out there. Anyways, so this is what's called tobacco. Now, I want you to know that for Indigenous peoples, for Anishinaabe peoples, it is fundamentally important that when we work with the current of creation, or when we follow Ishkonigan, natural law. We are doing that for the purposes of trying to create more life. Like when we build our families or we're building treaty, all these things I'm going to talk about. This teaching that I'm giving right now is the most fundamental teaching for every talk I'm going to give over the next 9 more after this, right? Which is that life begats life. So Indigenous peoples are most interested in how do we get more life. Indigenous peoples are not interested in how do we end life. We are end peoples. And the evidence of that is when many years ago, when we were in our communities, way before the newcomers came to this place, before what we would call Europeans or later Canadians came to this place, we were creating relationships with other nations. Like, how do you get to be the most diverse continent in the world unless you have acceptance of difference, an acceptance of having people working together, living together, but then somehow maintaining their integrity as cultures, as languages, as nations? Like, how does that happen? Like, it's not to say, of course, that Africa or Asia or Europe wasn't diverse. Of course it was. But certainly a lot of xenophobia in some of those places. A lot of war. A lot of people who just can't get along, can't share space in those kinds of areas. So we get a lot of empires. And there were certainly empires here in North America, South America. And I'm thinking North America, South America is one really big place. But you also saw like remarkable difference. Like remarkable ideas of people who can share space. Like for the Anishinaabe and the Cree, for example, where I come from in Treaty 1, we are people that literally live in the same place. We overlap each other. How could you get 2 nations in the same place, inhabiting the same land, but yet they're separate peoples? Just think about that for just a minute. Like, how could you do that? Like, imagine this for a moment. Imagine that Joe Biden phones up Justin Trudeau and says, hey, why don't we just share North America? Why don't we, or let's try this. Why don't we just share New Brunswick? Or Minnesota? Like, is that something you could fathom? Could you fathom the United States and Canada sharing territory and still maintaining their integrity and difference? Absolutely not. Because what is the United States motivation? What is Canada's motivation? US first. It's a natural policy. Canada goes Canada first. And there's tons of nationalism that goes into that. The CRTC, only playing Canadian music. Canadian universities only hiring Canadian academics, which is absurd if you're an Indigenous academic, that I can't hire someone from my nation that is simply about 5 kilometers away from the border. Like, that's the law in Canada. I actually saw you're funded by the federal government here, right? So you follow that law. If you get a job hire position, you have to interview Canadians first. And you have to deem that all the Canadians are irrelevant or unsuitable or incapable. Thank you very much. Wonderful, by the way. English. I'll remind you, remember me to teach you about what the word for Anishinaabe word for coffee is. It's a super fun word. Anyways. So like it's completely absurd. It's the United States and Canada can't share territory because they come from a European idea of nation states, which was invested and created by the Bretton Woods Agreement after World War II. And what did World War II give us? Probably the most xenophobic moment in history with the Holocaust, right? And by the way, the Middle East very much is invested within the current conflict in the Middle East, right? Or sorry, the World War II very much builds a situation in the Middle East with the creation of Israel, right? Or certainly the exodus of the people that go to Israel. Anyways, that being said, I'm certainly no expert on that particular conflict, but I can tell you that as someone who looks on the outside, I would say, well, why did those sort of conflicts not occur within indigeneity? And certainly we had wars, but not to the levels of genocide that perhaps might have been perpetrated in the empire building across the world. And if they did happen, they were very short-lived, like the Mayans, for example, and even that was debatable of whether that's an empire or not. But that being said, for Indigenous peoples, the reason that we're able to share space is because we have an inherent investment in each other. When the Europeans came, they were exposed to that. So for instance, the Blackcoats show up in our community and they say, hey, listen, we want to tell you this story. And we're like, oh, this is interesting. These guys show up, they're quite hairy, they've got big black coats. These are the Jesuits, by the way. These are the Catholic missionaries who show up in our community. And most of them are French. And they turn to us and they say, hey, listen, we want to tell you this story. It's about this guy. He's remarkable. He does incredible things. He tells stories that inspires millions of people. He can walk on water. One day he died, came back to life. We're like, man, that's a cool story. We got a guy in our stories that can turn into a rabbit. What's the name of your guy? And the guy said, Jesus. And we said, our guy's name is Winnipeg. And then, Winnipeg is the first human being. That's a pretty cool story about the first human being traveling across the world, transforming into a rabbit. Sometimes that Winnipeg can even transform genders. And we're like, maybe your guy and our guy are cousins. Because your guy can walk on water. That's pretty cool too. And the Blackcoats were like, nah, our stuff is the truth, capital T truth. Your stuff is devil worshiping superstitious nonsense. And we're like, are you sure? Because your stuff and our stuff kind of sounds similar. Kind of sounds like a world that's full of mystery and interest and provocation. And we're like, no. Our stuff is truth. And oh, by the way, cut your hair, get rid of those drums, burn those drums, and never, ever, ever tell those superstitious devil worshiping nonsense stories ever again. And we're like, you make quite an entrance there, Europeans. But here's the point. For Indigenous peoples, we are and peoples. We would see Jesus as a cousin. We would see anyone else, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as a cousin. We would see that person as a part of our lives. We'd want to know about that person. Because when we look out to creation, the only thing that I truly know about creation is that I don't know it all. That's really the only thing that I know. And as Indigenous peoples, we've spent millennia, centuries upon centuries upon centuries, studying creation. And we know a little bit, but we absolutely don't know it all. And so that when the Blackcoats show up and tell us about this far off land where things happen, we want to know about it. We want to learn about it, and we want to make that a part of our lives. So every time we encounter a newcomer, every single time we encounter you, we want to build a relationship with you. We want you to come here. Like, we didn't start rejecting people when they showed up in our communities. We said, sit down and have a meal. Let us show you where the medicines are. Hey, if we bring some turkey, we might make this thing called Thanksgiving. And so as Indigenous peoples, we're constantly welcoming people in because we want to learn. We want to be exposed. And then after we get exposed, then our children do this remarkable thing. They get married. They make babies. And then, yes, we may have conflicted at one time. Like, for instance, I could have conflicted with you. We could have even had a war together. But guess what happens if your daughter and my son get together? Or your daughter and my daughter get together? Is that pretty soon, now we're brother and sister. Or we're cousins, at least. And so that means that I'm never going to war with you. And that is the brilliance of treaty. That's what treaty is all about. Treaty is about us trying to figure out a way to live together and then share space, not burn drums and cut hair and change names. So that's going up the river. Going down the river means that we get the farthest if we live together and we work together. And that's what you did today. What you did today is you promoted life by offering me this beautiful medicine. So this is in Anishinaabe, Moen. We would use the term called asema. Asema. So that's the word that we use in the language. And so it comes from the Ojibwe word of ashema. Ashema. Now the word ashema means instant. That's what it means. So why do you think that tobacco would resemble the word in Ojibwe for instant? Asema. Why do you think that would be connected? So, well, let's try this. So Joan offered this to me just a minute ago. So Ibagajina Oma, you have offered me this gift. So you made an offering. So when you say the word Bagajinan, or when you make the offering, which is what you would do, you'd say Ibagajina, or you would say Ibagajiman, because that's the first pronoun. And then you would say, I set this down. That's what Bagajana means. I set it the offering down. That's why people will come like this to someone, right? That's when you offer that tobacco. If you said Bagadanan, then what you're doing is you're throwing it, you're giving it, right? Meaning I have no choice, but you've given me a choice. I have a choice to accept this tobacco or not. And when I accept this tobacco, I have done something instantly. What is it? Law. Because when you watch the beings in the universe give things to each other, there is always agency. There's always choice. You have the choice, for instance, to take something. You have the choice to run away. You have the choice to then give something back, right? Even in the most direst of circumstances, there's always agency. There's always evidence of choice. And so when that is offered to me, then I pick it up. And then I say, oh, what is this? Oh, it's tobacco. And so if you know the story of tobacco, tobacco is one of the hardest plants to grow. In fact, tobacco was fostered in this place amongst the Wendat people, also known as the Huron people. They're the tobacco carrying people. And Anishinaabe learned many of our teachings from our time with the Wendat, but we also learned it from other people as well. Not every Indigenous nation cares for tobacco. Like, for example, this teaching would be similar to corn pollen in the southern United States, in places like New Mexico. They use corn pollen there, they don't use tobacco. But our teaching relates to tobacco. Tobacco is very difficult to grow. It comes from little seeds about yay big, and you can actually try this. If you make the tiniest little hole in your hand that looks kind of like this, and you just look through and you can see somebody else just barely, that's the size of a tobacco seed. And that seed is intended to grow a plant about yay high. Now, how does it get to be from that? Well, care, kindness, consideration, sacrifice. Like if I gave you tobacco seeds, which are very hard because the government doesn't let you have those things, it would take a lot of effort to grow from the tiniest seed to the biggest plant. And to get from here to here is about 6 months. Sometimes 5 if you're lucky, if it's a nice growing season. But what you're doing is you're making sure there's enough heat, there's enough moisture for your tobacco. You might grow it as a heat lamp in your apartment. And to get to this little pinch, which would probably be, I don't know, 3 or 4 leaves, you're going to have to spend 100 hours doing this. So tobacco is not something you grow, it's something you earn. And it's very difficult. Tobacco is going to fail on you because you may have not shown the commitment necessary to grow that tobacco. To get to this little pinch right here, 100 hours. Now think about what you do with 100 hours of your time. I'm going to say you probably spend time with your kids. You probably do things that you love. If I said take 100 hours out of your schedule, what would most of that involve? Probably your job, things that you earn. Now add up all of the money that you have earned during 100 hours of your job. And then add in the things that you love. What's the cost of doing those things? If I said I could give you 1 hour of something that you love, how much money would you offer? I'm probably going to bet a lot, right? If I said it's $1 million and you get to go to do this amazing, beautiful place, because the only thing we really have to give each other is time. Time is immeasurable. It's uncalculable, meaning that there's no real cost that you can associate to time. It's billions. Now, if you want evidence of that, let me give you an example. Anybody lose anybody in your life? You lost somebody? Who did you lose in your life?
My dad.
Your dad. If I said to you, you could have another hour with your dad, but you have to give me every penny of all of the money that you're going to make for the rest of your life. Would you do it? Yeah, darn right you would, right? You'd be willing to give up all the money, meaning like if I said, what about your money and all of your family's money? You'd probably be willing to do that too.
Yeah.
Like just to get a few minutes more or an hour or time. That's what I mean. Time is immeasurable. And that's what you do with tobacco. When you give somebody tobacco, you are giving them your blood, your sweat, your tears, all of your attention, all the things that went into this tobacco, all the pain, all the suffering, all the amazingness, everything of what you are, you put into tobacco. That's why one of the greatest teachings that we have to give is that we recognize the agency of creation. We recognize plants. Like, do you have a plant that you talk to? Absolutely, you do. Do you know that plants respond to language? They respond to kindness. And if you want evidence of that, I always leave my house and my plants, I kill plants regularly. Because neglect, plants die from neglect, right? If you put attention, time, energy, blood, sweat, tears into this tobacco, and then you just give it away. So Joan this morning fostered, grew, earned, we don't always grow our tobacco now, we earn it through other means, our job and so on. This tiny little pinch that you put into this, you just gave it away to me. Now, Joan and I have been texting for a while, but we really don't know each other. I've never really met Joan until today. But first thing that happens, she offers me tobacco. Like, how much respect, time, energy has she put into our relationship before even getting to know me? And that's what you do when you offer tobacco. A shame up, a same up, instantly. By Joan showing the respect on behalf of all of you, because you're in this tobacco too, because you work with her, you've made your space, you've asked me to come here, all of you online that have dedicated your time today to spend this time to do this, you've put this into this tobacco. And what that means is that you have asked me with the greatest possible thing you can give, which is your time. You've shown me that you're interested and dedicated, and so I take very humbly this tobacco and I commit to you that I will give you that time back. And here's what I say miigwech. So when Anishinaabe say miigwech, what that means is that the operative word in that is miigwe. Miigwe. And now miigwe means I give. In English, you would say thank you, but that doesn't really mean anything. Like, what does it really mean? It means I thank you. I, as an independent being, recognize the gift that you have given to me. It's kind of selfish. It's a little bit arrogant, but like it's actually very individualistic, which is kind of the hallmark of the Western tradition. I thank you. I give you the respect from me. But if I said I will give you back what you've given to me, which is what I'm saying, miigwech actually is the pluralized verb of that. So I will hand it on, or for the things we've come together, I will give it on, or we will give it on. So what we mean is that when we say miigwech, it means that we are offering each other time. And for the time period that we will walk and travel together, this tobacco will carry us. This tiny little pinch right here, this will carry us. Now, this is what I received from Waterloo yesterday from a big audience, and you can actually feel the actual leaves in here of how big they are. So I'll hand this around so you can actually feel it, because that's tobacco that's just in the process of drying. And they offered that to me last night. This is very much very refined, taken care of, and crumbled tobacco. But the asema is law. Because if you look at that teaching that I just gave you, this is the exact same teaching that the sun and the moon have. So if you watch the sun and the moon, they are eternally connected to each other. And that we might call that gravity. But another word for that to call is gift giving. When we offer gifts, the currency of creation is gift giving. Meaning that everything gives a gift to each other. And these are eternal gifts. So if you look to the ways, for instance, the sun and the moon operate, they operate in concert. You can look at this astronomically, right? So through the stars. You could look at this through gravity. You could look at this in the symbiotic way that they travel in the sky. You can actually watch this and see that when the sun moves, so does the moon. They work together. They offer each other time, space, and relationship. You know, another word for that's called treaty. That's how we share space. And so Anishinaabe, we're looking out there and we're like, oh, okay, that's how people share space. They give gifts to each other. So the sun gives moon light, and the moon gives sun commitment and relationship. And we might actually begin to say, well, that looks like a family to me. And then we go, oh, well, this is actually very similar to the way water and earth operate. And we call kind of the offerings the shoreline, the way that they offer and they give gifts to each other. Right? So we got you. So we and then we look to see, oh, well, the bear and the fish are the same thing, right? The fish offers their lives, their bodies to bears, but the bears also offer their lives and bodies in return to the fish. After they die, they turn into the earth, which turns into algae, and the fish eat. It's like there is miigwetches happening everywhere. Miigwetches are constant series of commitments to each other that are about fulfillment and gift giving. And when we offer tobacco, that is one way that we offer gifts, but it's not the only way. Another way that we offer gifts is, for instance, through our names. So I greeted you at the beginning here by offering you my name, Nigaan Sinclair. But you would then turn around. What's the thing that when someone offers their name, you offer your name? So we give gifts as names all the time. And what is a name? A name is always a story. And don't ever think that your name isn't a powerful story. You know, I often hear people, especially Canadians, who say, my name doesn't mean anything. That's not true. You were named that way for a reason. You were given that name for a purpose. Yes, sometimes it was the name on Young and the Restless, the soap opera show. Victor or Nikki, right? But your parents cared about that show. And maybe they were at home watching that show when you were being fostered and grown in your mother. Or that your father really loved that show and wanted to give you a teaching about Victor, right? My point is that no name doesn't have a story. And that story is always yours. And it is always, almost always, profoundly about love. Profoundly about kindness and generosity. So when you carry that name, and when you offer that to somebody else, you're offering that story as well. And what someone offers back to you is the same thing, the kindness and generosity of their family. And the really powerful thing is we often carry two names. One of the greatest teachings about Europeans is that you carry your ancestral name, so that you carry this entire series of generations behind you. As Indigenous peoples, we didn't have often that. We would carry the names of named after people, but we wouldn't have a last name. That's a European tradition, which is a beautiful, beautiful tradition, which says that I'm not only giving you my name that was gifted to me by my direct parents or my direct name giver of my community, but here's all my ancestors too. What a remarkable gift that is. And so when Europeans did that, we said, we like that tradition. We're going to take that tradition too. And so for Indigenous peoples, we carry our ancestral names down too. Oftentimes full of Scottish people, French people, English people, Germans, Filipino people. I'm trying to think of all my different friends that have all these different cultures and communities, Guyanese, all the different relationships that all of us come, South African, Zimbabwe, you know, all these different beautiful, beautiful teachings that then come with that name. We also give other things too. We give space. That's what handshakes are. We agree to share space, meaning that we are agreeing to collaborate and to be in contact with each other. We also give food. Food is about saying, here is what we have created. Here's what our experience is. Here's what our history is. And we'd like you to take a little taste of it. And that's what gift giving operates. So for Indigenous peoples, this is the currency of creation. It's not just tobacco that we offer to each other. It's also the ways in which we get to know one another. And so you may notice something, and I'm saying this to all the people who are online and also people that are here. You're going to start to notice things after hearing this presentation. You'll be like, well, Indigenous peoples are constantly giving gifts. Constantly. Like, for instance, here's one of the greatest gifts that I witnessed during Idle No More. So during Idle No More was the time period in which there was a tremendous conflict happening in Syria. And so as a result, Canada agreed to take on people who were refugees from that conflict. And so many of them were sent to Winnipeg, to Treaty 1 territory, the first place Canada created after Confederation. Canadians and Indigenous peoples created after Confederation. And so when we heard that there were hundreds of Syrians flying to Winnipeg, we went down to the airport and we drummed them in, which is our biggest honor we can give to somebody. In fact, if you heard Wab Canoe this morning, and the first thing he did as the new premier of Manitoba is he said, and I would like to recognize this moment with a song. And you know, we recognize the beauty of our new relatives who are coming from a faraway place, and we offer you a song because a gift is what you give when we tell you that you're welcome here. And what we hoped is that people understood that they were home now. They were with relatives who love them and care about them. And this tremendous pain they were coming from, we hope that we can lighten this in some way, or we can help people through this. And we do the same thing when the Ukrainians came to Winnipeg. The exact same thing. We drummed them in when they came into the airport. And they may not have understood what it is that was happening, but that's what a relationship's all about. A relationship's about getting to know one another, trying each other's food, hearing each other's names, spending the time necessary to get to know one another by saying Niigaan, and so that's a little bit about law. I just taught you a little bit about Anishinaabe Ishkonagan, the natural law of this place, which predates Anishinaabe. Like, I'm not really talking about Anishinaabe here. I'm talking about the sun and the moon. I'm talking about the bears and the fish. I'm talking about the earth and the water. That's what we noticed about this place. And that being here on this territory for tens of thousands of years, when we see each other, we act differently. By the way, that's what your territorial acknowledgement is about. And the session that I do about the earth will talk about the territorial acknowledgement, meaning that it's crucial that we see each other, because we don't see each other, and Canadians, frankly, and newcomers have been often taught not to see Indigenous peoples. And the evidence of that is, I went to Colombo when I was 22 years old, Sri Lanka. And they put in Colombo, I was on the Canadian International Development Agency, a team, and I was in the middle of Sri Lanka, and the university asked me to come and speak. And so they just put Nigaan Sinclair, an Indigenous person from Canada, will be speaking today. And so they advertised my talk, and I walked there, and there were like 500 people showed up. They had no idea who I was. I was 22 years old at the time. And it was because people in Sri Lanka had not imagined that Indigenous peoples in North America existed anymore. Because they had seen all these movies of us dead, or from 1,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, or whatever. And so, of course, when I showed up dressed like this, it was really even more profound for them. Because they were like, well, where's your traditional clothing? And then I spoke English, and they said, well, like, why aren't you speaking your Indigenous language to us? And and they said, well, why don't you dance? And I said, well, we don't really have music here. I don't have dancing. And so my point is that as Indigenous peoples, we shift and change all the time, and we look different, just like the sun and the moon changes season, or the earth and the water change season. They change colors. They change the way they look. Like everybody changes and grows. And so that's really ultimately what I want to talk about for today, which is just the notion of what is Indigenous law. And the principle that we understand Indigenous law to be is really centered around the notion of gift giving. So that leads me to the big question for all of you for today, which is, what is your gift? Because when you get a gift, which is what I hope to be the gift that I'm offering you today, or the gift that you have started the process, what's your gift? What's the gift that you will offer to this, not just down to me, I'm not actually from here, but to those in your territory? Is it kindness? Is it a little bit of food? Is it a story? And my hope is that when you offer that gift, know that it is welcome. We want to hear your gift, because maybe one day our children will marry. And that's what we hope. We hope as Indigenous peoples that our children get to be best friends, that to be cared for, that you care for our children the way that you care for your children, that we care for your children the way that we care for our children. That's the hope. That's why treaty exists, is that it was intended for us to live together. There was never supposed to be settler and Indigenous. That was never supposed to be a thing. It is a thing when you have a bunch of people say, I only work for myself. It's me. Canada, United States. But when Indigenous peoples can share territory, absolutely we can say we're Anishinaabe and Cree at the same time. We can say that. But for some reason, history, individuality, competitiveness, capitalism, you get people who are me. And I don't really care about you. I'm only gonna hire my own, talk about my own, only to share money with my own. And I think that's one of the things that goes upstream, not downstream. So I just wanted to, I think I'm getting near the end there. Yeah, oh yeah, I'm looking at that. But I promised to teach you about the word for coffee in Ojibwe, right? So I promised that just a little while ago when I got this wonderful coffee. So the word for coffee in our language is muckade wobble, muckade wobble. So the word muckade is very clear, it means black. So it's also the word we use for bison, which is Makade Bijiki. Right, so it's like black. So I'm talking about the color, right? So we would say Makade wobble, black fluid, right? But it's not black fluid because it's wobble. Wobble is the word we use for fluid, but it's also a word that we use when water has been talked to or water has been recognized the sacredness of it. You'll often see that in ceremony when Anishinaabe Kwe, people who are self-identifying as female, Anishinaabe females, raise that water because it is Anishinaabe females that can birth. And so they carry the sacred teaching around the water. So when they raise that water 4 times, they'll say wobble, Mide wobble, Mide wobble, Mide wobble, meaning that it's spiritual water. And then Nibe, this is Nibe, because it hasn't been spoken to, I don't think, but it would be Nibe, which is like Winnipeg, where I come from, Winnipeg, talks about the water. But when it becomes blessed, then it becomes wobble. So what's the Ojibwe word for coffee? Black spirit or life water. And there's nothing more beautiful than that when we talk about what coffee really does. Because when you drink it, it blesses you with jitters or with energy and focus, right? So I think that our ancestors are beautiful and invested within the language, a little bit of humor, but also a little bit of kind of brilliance there. You know, it is sacred water when it's blessed like that. So Makade wobble, everybody, and miigwech for the coffee. That's everything for today. I think I have to go film pretty soon. But I just want to say a big miigwech to all of you who are online. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I won't be late when we're virtual. I'll be coming to you from either a hotel room somewhere, or I'll be coming to you from my office back in my studio, back in Winnipeg and Treaty 1 territory. But I'm happy to do more sessions. And if you could just hand me my list of my phone's over there. So can you just say what the listings are that I
Gift giving is today, the land, treaties, education, and then Q&A, and then governance, health, justice, future, and Q&A.
Yeah, so I've given you 2 Q&A sessions, meaning that all of you and any of you who just want to, like, you're just out there and you're experiencing things, or you see something, or you want me to, you wanted me to give you my thoughts on, or what would be happening in the Indigenous world, right? Let's say that you go to an art gallery. You say, oh, I've seen a Kent Monkman piece. And I was thinking about, why is it so predominant that this image happens in all these different pieces? And so, happy to talk about that if I know about it. Sometimes I won't know everything, so I'll just say I don't know. But because I work in this field, my whole life is working in Indigenous aesthetics, meaning art, or Indigenous, I write about Indigenous politics for newspapers. I'm on CBC regularly talking about Chinese election interference, meaning what is Indigenous perspectives of that. So like, I'm always talking about these things, right? And I'm always talking about, anything to do with Indigenous expression, perspectives, or pedagogies. So any of those things I'm happy to talk about. So I give 2 sessions for Q&A, but on the other sessions, those are things that I'll be speaking about. In the second half, it's more specific, but the first half is very general. Here's what Indigenous 101 kind of thing is. That's stuff that I talk about in my intro classes. All right, so I'm happy to hang out here, and for those of you that are online, I'm not sure what you're gonna do. You don't have coffee, but please drink some coffee. But I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes if you guys want to ask some questions, or there's no open questions. It's like, I like that thing just flashed on the screen. No open questions.
Sorry.
We have nothing to say about you. So oh, thanks to Amanda for the comment on there. Thank you, Natalia. Wonderful. One day I would love if people told me, like, where's everybody from? Because I have very strong affinities with the Sneaky family in Winnipeg. So I go to prayers on Friday. I can tell you that when I'm in the mosque, it is the closest I've ever been to Anishinaabe. I can't, Anishinaabe, we do ceremony 4 times a year. But for me, sometimes I need more. So I go to prayers on Friday. And because I think that's the closest I've ever experienced, spending time with my Islamic brothers and sisters. I've often thought to be a part of, to be a Muslim. So I've thought about that a lot. because I care a lot, and I also really spend a lot of time thinking about. I've also spent a lot of time in church, but I have a really deep affinity for Islam. So, anyways, so happy to hear if other people have some similar experiences or whatever. So. Oh yeah, I get gifts. I have a whole bunch of them.
I just wanted to know what is.
Well, I'll always wear water clan beings because I'm Namago Shindo Dem, which is rainbow
Oh.
trout clan. So so this is my actual clan, but when I wear this, the turtle is the head of our clan, and so I was given this as a gift.
Oh.
And so I always wear water clan everything. So everything I have is water clan. Like there's more turtles right there. And then I have a really beautiful one that was made for me by a good friend of mine, a colleague of mine. So this was made for me, but the thing I like about this is this was made traditionally for me because we always have an imperfect bead. And this will actually be a teaching when I talk about the earth, is that there is nothing that's or there's always anomaly. Or what I would say, which is that the one thing that Anishinaabe know for sure is that creation is queer. Oh, that's kind of a controversial thing to say, but it's because there is always connections between things. There is always gray areas. There's always the center of creation really is about how things are connected, not how they're separate. And so that bead right there is showing that the only thing we know about perfection is imperfection, or imperfection is perfection. And so when I say queerness, what I mean is that they, them. That's really the fundamental tenet of creation. Creation leans towards that. It doesn't lean towards separateness. And anyone tells you otherwise is just not like is just not looking. So there's like fundamental tenets in creation that really talk about collaboration and connectivity. It isn't that things shouldn't be independent. Of course, there's a role for independence, but there's also a role for interconnection. So in our cultures, for example, we didn't have this creation of differences in gender, sexuality, or even our bodies. Like we would say that we aren't just separate to water, but we are also water. So like we're 70% water. So like we are the water.
Could you just answer a question if you don't mind? I'm just thinking about, the various conflicts that are happening around the world. So if you're looking at it, and I think you touched on this earlier, but if you're looking at it through the Anishinaabe sort of view of the world, how with some of these conflicts, what would be like the approach to resolving some of these challenges and some of these differences and some of these conflicts? What would the approach be, or the thought process be?
Well, I mean, if you want to know where the Middle East comes from, or arguably the colonization of North America comes from, it comes from this belief that Christians are better than non-Christians. And so that's the papal bulls in the 15th century, starting in 1452, 1453, 1492. Those three papal bulls, which were issued by Pope Nicholas and his successors, were the fundamental belief that Christians were better than non-Christians, and that has to do with land, acquiring land and resources that Christians were interested in, and that frankly, non-Christians or people from Islamic nations also adopted certain perspectives, and I think sometimes arguably maybe reaction to the violence that Christians were perpetrated. But I don't really care who started what. Here's what I care about is, can we be adults? And can we see each other as human beings? And so fundamentally, there's been atrocities based on that belief, which is one group thinks it's better than the other group. And therefore, one group gets rights, the other group does not get rights. And if I were to just talk about the current situation, for example, in the Middle East, it is without irony that America, who is fundamentally almost blindly invested within one side of that conflict and claiming that group is the indigenous group, therefore they have a claim to Israel or the West Bank or Gaza, but yet America is the most brutal to Indigenous people of all. Like, it is so without irony that, like, and I'm not making a stand there. I'm not saying which I support one group or another, or I support the death of people at a music festival. I would never say that. Here's what I would say. America's a bit of a hypocrite. And when you start throwing around the term Indigenous and going, oh, this group's Indigenous, therefore they deserve this land and they deserve to protect themselves. I'm like, you're the group that has perpetrated the most atrocities and continue to perpetrate atrocities in the United States. And don't think Canada is any better, because when Canada sort of supports one side and says, well, this side is absolutely worth supporting, the other side, not so much. Hey, like, hello, everybody. Canada's not, they got a lot of blood on their hands too. So like, instead of us trying to make faulty, hypocritical arguments, we should be adults and go, well, which is going to save more children? Which is going to, like, if we all said that we love children, which I think generally people tend to agree, we all think children are good, then, like, what's going to save more children? And I could guarantee it's not what's happening right now. And I say that for everybody involved in that conflict, not one side or the other, and certainly not, I'm not wagging my finger at the United States or even Canada. I'm wagging that finger at myself too. Like, am I doing the best I can do to help children live and thrive and be, like, I want my daughter to go to university and not be murdered in a missing Indigenous woman, but I want your daughter to be that too. Am I working hard enough to make that happen? That's what I hope, that we all take that tenet, and I hope that that's answering a little bit of your question. Thank you, Sharon, for that.
Thank you.
Okay. I apologize, I have to fly in a minute here, but maybe I'll hand this back to you, or I'm not sure who's going or.
I'm so thrilled, and I'm just watching everybody around in this room. Everybody's spellbound and everybody's nodding. And I mean, it's just like, I'm just so thrilled that you're here, and it takes the pressure off me. I mean, you know, I'm just so thrilled, and thank you.
Oh, my honor.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.